We have now started.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to one of the series of Alpine Supply Chain Solutions. We do our monthly webinar, and I'm excited today to talk about ERP, WMS, and cloud. Oh my. And this is an overview of implementing Microsoft D365 WMS and Finance and Operations, FNO. The information discussed in this session represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice or the views of Alpine. You should consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel as needed for your specific situations. Dave? And good afternoon. My name is Greg Utter. I'm one of the senior managing directors at Alpine. I'll be your moderator today, and we're being joined by some folks that I'm going to introduce on the next slide. Dave? First is Natalie Landgraf. Natalie is a supply chain professional with expertise in end-to-end business operations. Her passion for logistics was sparked early in her life through volunteer work in event coordination. She excels in WMS implementations, offering full spectrum support from documentation to go live. As of just today, I'm proud to say that Natalie has been named a 2024 Women in Supply Chain Award winner by Food Logistics and Supply and Domain Chain Executive magazines. This award honors females in supply chain leaders and executives whose accomplishments, mentorship, and examples set a foundation for women at all levels of a company's supply chain network. So, congratulations, Natalie, on that award that was just given today. Next is Jerilyn Wise. Jerilyn is a seasoned professional with extensive experience in end to end implementation, specializing in training, standard operating procedures, creation, and testing. With a robust background in warehouse management systems and enterprise resource planning, Jerilyn has consistently delivered successful projects by leveraging comprehensive knowledge of leading industry supply chain software platforms. And lastly, I'm happy to introduce Jo Sowards. Jo is the integration manager for Dexter. She's responsible for assisting new sites to transition from their old legacy solutions to D365, WMS, and FNO. She's responsible for testing the existing system and documentation and training of the front end users. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Natalie to go through the first series of slides.
Go ahead to the next slide, Dave. Thank you. Thanks, Greg. So today we're going to begin with a review of the main steps in any software implementation, and then we'll dive deeper into each of the unique factors you can expect to see throughout the steps of the process for D365, starting with your people and going all the way through to go live, and we'll also have time for questions at the end. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat of the meeting, and our moderator or host or myself will read the question at an appropriate time, or we'll wait until the question section of our presentation. Go ahead, Dave. So for today's webinar, we'll be elaborating on the unique aspects of implementing D365 specifically, but if you're looking for more detail on implementations themselves, I definitely recommend going to our website to look at our previous webinars, especially the one from earlier this year called The Journey. This visual is actually from that webinar, and it shows the main steps of an implementation regardless of the system, starting with design, going into documentation, testing the system and preparing data, training users on the system, and going live with the system. We'll touch on each of these in our presentation today with specific points about D365. Go ahead, Dave.
So successful ERP and WMS implementation is going to depend on having the right people in the right roles. You'll hear this as a theme a lot within this presentation because it's such a fundamental piece. It's not just about having the right people who are good at their day-to-day tasks. They also need skills that go beyond just knowing their job. Look for people's ability to get along with others, While different personalities can help a team thrive, you don't want individuals who are all self-interested or prone to working alone. Those rogue personalities can sabotage the project without even realizing it. It's essential that everyone is working together towards the same goal. People in the room will also need to be detail-oriented. You want people who can think ahead so you don't get to go live and hear, actually, this isn't going to work for us because we do things differently. It's about thinking about how each function affects other roles, ensuring nothing slips through the cracks. Adaptability is another key trait. There will be change. We're not just replicating the old system into the new one. This is something new, and your team needs to understand and embrace it. They need to be positive about the benefits of change and flexible when timelines shift. The best design for one department isn't always going to be the best design for the company as a whole. So team members need to see beyond their immediate role and understand what the benefits are for the larger organization. Now, it's important to remember that not everyone is going to embody all of these traits at all the same time. The key is balance. And if you can't find that balance internally, it might be worth bringing in an experienced third party to help facilitate discussions, address concerns, and keep things moving smoothly. Joe is going to share an example of a strategic move that their team went through during the design sessions. Joe, I'm throwing it over to you.
Thank you. One of the things that we tried to do was to always get the system in what we referred to as the vanilla option. This gave us the opportunity to use the system as it was designed instead of what we were familiar with. Doing that gave us several benefits. First of all, fewer configurations, you'll find out later, makes a big difference in the long run. But it also gave us an opportunity to learn what's a better way to do something. And since it turned out that we did in fact have so many different companies all at once because we were merging multiple companies into a single one, we couldn't. So having the ability to go with our vanilla option, but straight out of the box choices, gave us an opportunity to see how it worked, and then we adapted later. When you're looking at this, when you have your people in there, make sure that you have people who currently know what the processes and activities are, because they're going to be the ones that tell you where those outlines are. But you also need people in the room that can approve these changes, because we don't want the end users to tell you what all they need and then the executives tell you they're not going that way. So you have to have both, and then make sure that you have your partners and that you can work well with them as a team, because when you have the third party come in and help you, you need to be honest with them and they need to be honest with you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. Dave, can you go to the next slide?
Before we move on, I've got a question from the audience, and anybody on the call can answer this. And the question is, our company runs pretty lean, maybe a little bit too lean. What if we already know starting this project that we don't have enough internal resources to carry off a successful software implementation, either ERP or WMS?
I can take that question. So first, kudos to you guys for knowing in advance that you might not have the resources you need. Doing that deep assessment of the skills you have internally, the availability you have internally. You might have someone who would be perfect for the role, but they just cannot make it work with their current responsibilities and can't be taken away from them. That's when you should start looking for partners such as Alpine to fill in that core team. And we can come in and really understand your business operations from the beginning and be your end-to-end implementation partner to help supplement your team.
Great. Thank you for that answer.
Thank you.
So moving into the design process here, implementing the ERP and WMS simultaneously is a huge task, but with the right approach, you can make it work. This process impacts every department: finance, planning, warehouse, sales, credit, the list goes on. Normally, during the WMS rollout, we'd only really check in with the departments like finance or sales to let them know about a few tweaks. Maybe there's a new button or two that they'll be needing to use, but their day-to-day operations just really don't change that much. With that dual ERP and WMS, everyone's role changes. It's not just a tech project, it's a business transformation. You can't afford to leave anyone out of the design phase. This part of the project is like building the foundation of your house. If it's shaky, the whole project is going to crumble. Everyone needs to be in the room talking about their needs and how their department workflows go. Take merchandising, for example. They usually handle item setup, but the way they do it impacts purchasing, finance, warehouse, and even sales. You're dealing with about 26 to 30 basic fields, and those fields control how an item is purchased, how it's sold, how it's stocked, and more. Merchandising cannot handle this alone. You need impact from everyone because every field they fill out affects the other department's functions. And it's not enough to just have them in the room. They need to understand the decisions that are being made and how one choice impacts another. For example, if finance wants to manage payment terms differently, how does that affect sales or accounts receivable? It's all connected. Keep in mind having both front-end users as well as your key stakeholders. Key stakeholders can help challenge the need to stay the same and can ultimately break the stalemates between needs versus want decisions. During the design sessions, pay attention to each department's access needs. It's a great idea to have someone create a matrix on each department and whether they need to view, edit, delete, create each function within the system. These decisions will later translate into security roles. When everyone has access to only what they need, you reduce the risk of errors and improve the system's security. It's not about restricting people, but making sure everyone can focus on their own tasks without accidentally changing how the system works. Another consideration is whether or not you're going to use cloud versus the on-prem of your WMS. If you go with the cloud-based WMS, your system scales with your business. It's flexible with easy to access features to add a new warehouse or to update your system. You won't need to invest in expensive hardware, and you can really reduce the IT overhead because the cloud provider handles maintenance, security, and updates. Cloud systems are also accessible from anywhere, which is a huge advantage for those teams that are working remotely or across multiple locations. Security is another major benefit of the cloud. They come with built-in security features like encryption, automatic updates, and regular data backups, things you'd have to handle yourself with an on-prem solution. This means you can recover more quickly if something goes wrong and your data stays protected. These are the big picture considerations, but it all comes down to this: collaboration and smart planning. Bringing all the right people together from the start and setting clear roles are crucial steps in making sure your ERP and WMS implementation runs smoothly. It's about setting the system up to support your business, not the other way around. Dave, next slide.
Before you do, there's one more question, and you kind of answered it, Jerilyn, but this is a little bit of a different spin. And they're asking, what are the key long-term advantages and potential drawbacks of choosing a cloud-based implementation as opposed to on-prem, specifically regarding scalability and IT resource management? Do you have an opinion on that?
Sure. So let's go back to that scalability feature that you were speaking of. As your business grows, cloud allows you to grow with it, meaning that you can add additional warehouses, you can add other businesses within your ERP and WMS system. And I would say the downside to using cloud are some of those automatic updates. That's something that we will talk about a little bit later in our slides about the need for really testing through and ensuring that any update won't break anything that you have existing in your system.
Great. And I'll add one more short comment. Alpine does a lot of WMS selections. We did about a dozen last year, and we'll do at least that many this year. And it's notable that there are a lot of providers out there today that are only offering cloud-based solutions. They no longer offer on-prem. So keep that in mind if you're going down the path of a selection that you may be forced into a cloud solution based upon whatever vendor you pick.
All right, so another key aspect of design is determining which systems you'll need D365 to interact with in order to keep your operations running. A typical ERP implementation is shown in the left chart here in black, where the ERP speaks to an integration layer that's coded in such a way that it can transfer information to other systems, such as your warehouse management system or WMS, order management system, OMS, warehouse control system like your conveyors and pick modules, and your transportation or yard management systems. And your business may not have all of these, but these are very common integration needs. And notice that the information from those systems goes back to the middleware so that the ERP can get updated as well. Now with D365, your integrations will be different than other implementations since your ERP and WMS are one system. So in this right chart here, you can see that. It reduces the number of connections needed between your systems as a result. But keep in mind, this is really only true if you decide to go live with all of your sites all at once in a simultaneous go live. All of your locations would switch to D365 and no longer use your legacy ERP and WMS systems, which is quite a drastic cutover to do if you have a lot of sites, but it can be worth the effort to keep integration simple. Now, businesses with several sites or a lot of employees may need to take an even more different approach, which we'll show on the next slide here, Dave. So financial records may need to be all in one place for audit purposes. So if you're going live with some sites but not all, which we refer to as a staggered go live, you may need to integrate your legacy ERP with D365 in order to have one point of record for financial data. You'll also likely need to maintain all of your legacy integrations and systems in the meantime. As a result, an additional integration layer is necessary in this case so that your legacy ERP can send data to D365 for periodic storage. There are many factors to consider when choosing between a simultaneous go live and a staggered go live, but as you've seen in the past few diagrams we've shown so far, integrations has to be one of those factors you consider. On one hand, maintaining your legacy systems might not be a challenge if you have a large and capable IT team. On the other, some of your IT team will need to be dedicated to D365, so your resources would be split between your systems and managing all of them at the same time. All of these diagrams and information is meant to just point out that D365 reduces the need for integrations in some areas since the ERP and WMS are combined into one, but the approach you choose for Go Live will ultimately determine your integration needs from there. All right, next slide, Dave.
Data accuracy is going to be a make or break component to your new system. D365 is a very smart system, but it can really only make decisions based on the data it's given. So if that data is inaccurate, the system won't perform as expected. This is why a thorough validation process is essential to make sure everything from the previous system transfers over correctly. Normally, in just a WMS go live, your ERP would be the house of the key data aspects. So think of your customer information, payment terms, vendor, item master. And so when the data comes over to the WMS, really we're just validating that that came over correctly and that the locations in the WMS are correct. The dual transition means that every aspect must be validated. We need to verify all of those key data aspects that you see over here on the screen. Let me give you an example. Say a customer has always been COD or collect on delivery, but during your system conversion, they were incorrectly set to net 30, meaning they have 30 days to pay. The front-end user is going to trust the system. So the driver will drop off the product without collecting payment. Now, either the invoice is never going to get paid or it's going to take months to sort out, causing confusion for both the customers and the team. Another example is your min-max setting on your items. This is what's going to tell master planning how many units should be stocked in a warehouse at any given time. If this setting is off, purchasing could either overstock the item or fail to order it altogether, leading to back orders and frustrated customers. The key takeaway: everyone needs to be involved in ensuring data accuracy from the beginning. A common phrase we hear is garbage in, garbage out. If incorrect data goes into the system, that's exactly what you're going to get out of it. Joe, I know you've handled data validation for over 40 buildings. Can you share how your team ensured that data was accurate and what steps were taken if those errors popped up after go live?
Whether you have one building that's transferring or multiple buildings that's transferring, making sure that your data is correct is critical, because you don't want to upset customers, you don't want to delay orders, and it is a big task when you're working on your data validation, but it is probably the most critical one before you go live, because that tells what your go forward activities are going to be. So we started with individuals that were extremely knowledgeable about the particular topic it was, whether it was products, customers, vendors, terms of service, whatever. We had different people looking at each different form of data, but we also provided them with a list of what they needed to confirm. Because if you just say, go validate the data, then it sometimes comes back that they're like, yep, that's data. They haven't really looked at it because they don't know what they're supposed to look at. So keep a list of what they need to look at, compare the list, and if there's any, as Jerilyn mentioned, garbage in, you will have to live with that. So it's good to clean that up before you put it in the system so that you're not putting in stuff that won't be really good. Okay? Jerilyn?
Thanks so much, Joe, for sharing. I appreciate it. When you're implementing D365, keeping it as close to base as possible should be your goal. Most business requirements can actually be met through those simple configurations. But when you find a gap, it's important to ask a few questions. Is this truly a business requirement, or is it just a limitation from your previous system? And what can D365 offer out of the box that achieves something similar? And this could be handled with a change in process rather than creating a modification. There's always going to be a temptation to replicate your old system into the new one, but it's important to challenge the why behind your requirements. Some modifications are going to be necessary. Reducing them is just going to save quite a lot of hassle. Joe, your system has some modifications. Can you share how your team manages these during the Microsoft mandatory updates to ensure that nothing breaks?
We did attempt to be vanilla. We didn't want a modification, but there were just some things that the system would not do that we needed. So there have been a few things that we have had configured or set up specifically for us. And in the process of that, we're creating test scripts. And when you're told that you have an update coming up, you need to make a plan to actually test everything. This isn't just the things that you've modified, but it's also the items that you didn't modify to make sure that everything does function as you expect. So we do both the active testing on our modifications and regressive testing on the things that we didn't expect to change to make sure there are no surprises. And these are just things that you have to plan for. And if there is anything that does not turn out anticipated, you need to be working early enough so that you have time and resources available to fix it and then do the testing again to make sure it does turn out as you need. So don't procrastinate on those things. Make sure you get ahead. Okay?
Perfect, thank you. Dave, next slide. Now that your system is configured, it's time to focus on documenting those changes. Remember when we talked about the security permissions earlier? Well, it's important to bring that same structure into your documentation. Your document should clearly outline which roles are responsible for which tasks. This applies to both your ERP and WMS sides. There's going to be overlap, so it's important to be clear about who's performing what. One of the biggest things to consider is accessibility. These documents need to be localized and structured in a way that allows someone to find the information they need in under a minute. Why? Well, because when we're live in the system, they tend to panic, especially if a customer's waiting or there's time-sensitive issues and they've forgotten how to perform a task. That's when people tend to go off book and just start making guesses and clicking around. Clear, quick to access documentation helps prevent that. But it doesn't stop there. D365 is an evolving system, and as you roll out updates, your standard operating procedures or SOPs will need to be updated as well. So define who leads these updates. These should be people who work with the system every day, and they know the processes, the steps, and the best way to phrase things. It's not something that should be done in isolation. Collaboration is key here. Another great feature that D365 offers is Microsoft Learn for your subject matter experts. This is almost like Google for D365. Microsoft Learn will provide how-tos for the base configuration in D365, and it will not cover your custom modifications. It's a really great starting point for troubleshooting unexpected errors. These resources are invaluable when figuring out what drives certain tasks within the system and can help provide insight beyond the documentations that you created. Dave?
So the next two sections of our presentation cover the absolutely most critical portions of implementation. And I'll say it again, this slide and the next one are the most important for your implementation, and they are testing and training. So first we're going to talk about testing. The main testing events include unit testing, system integration testing, and user acceptance testing. In unit testing, each component of a system is tested to ensure it's designed according to your business requirements. As you can imagine, testing every component of an ERP plus every component of a WMS takes a lot of time. For example, one person might test if the settings for pricing are correct, and then a different person tests location setup, and another person tests receiving. Then we move into system integration testing, or SIT, where we ensure that all of those connecting lines from the charts we talked about before are working. Does the information transfer properly? How long does it take? Does it show if an integration failed? And does it provide a reason or error code that will be helpful to someone who needs to problem solve it? And finally, user acceptance testing, or UAT. This form of testing is end-to-end and requires end users from multiple functions to be present so they can kind of pass the baton between the different processes. For example, a salesperson would enter a customer's order, merchandising would validate the pricing on that order, a waiver will oversee the release process, the warehouse will pick the work, a clerk will finalize the shipping process, the inventory team makes sure all the transactions are logged properly, and then finally, it goes all the way back around to finance and accounting to ensure that the correct accounts were affected for the entire scenario. And that's just one. Then you repeat the entire process for a customer return or a transfer or other variations of your regular orders. What if the customer cancels and we already picked it? The inventory and financial impacts have to be validated for that scenario too. While UAT is essential for any system success, it's of paramount importance when implementing D365. Since both ERP and WMS are being implemented, a failure in one area will immediately impact the other areas. For example, let's say the scenario is to cancel an order that's already been picked. If the warehouse worker successfully unpicks it, that part's good, but the inventory associate might notice that the inventory didn't properly get stored again. So now the ERP will show lower values of inventory in the building than there really are, which affects your financial reporting. And this impacts immediate since there's no integration between ERP and WMS to potentially stop that issue from reaching the financial side from the warehouse. And there are hundreds of examples of this that have to be validated during UAT. Ultimately, D365 requires dedicated time and resources to manage testing, just like any other implementation. You need a person or a team that's familiar with the requirements, collects the list of scenarios to test, coordinates the resources that will execute the tests, tracks the pass or fail status of every scenario, and guides the testers to make sure they understand the objectives of the test. What are we trying to validate? What's expected for the system to do in each scenario? How do we know if it failed? And what tools will the testers need to help them complete the test, such as documentation that we mentioned previously? Make sure you have a testing lead or a partner like Alpine that can confidently manage all of these needs to make your testing successful. Because this is your chance to catch any potential issues and sign off on the system before going live. Now, one thing to add is that a special consideration for D365, especially in a staggered go live, is that unit testing and SIT may need to be repeated because some sites will have unique needs or data to validate before they go live that would not have been tested in your original rounds. User acceptance testing may not be necessary from start to finish on all your processes all over again, but your new aspects of the system do need to be validated. Dave? The second portion of our 2 critical steps in implementation is training, because now it's time to get everyone's knowledge level up to speed in preparation for go live. Your current employees are your greatest asset and will create the foundation for go live success. Good training and good attendance gives you a much better shot at a good go live, but a lack of training or bad attendance is almost a guaranteed failure, even if everything else in your system is working perfectly. First, let's start with the people who've been involved since the beginning of the project. We refer to them as subject matter experts or SMEs. These are the first group and will continue to be some of the strongest resources throughout the project. In a staggered go-live approach, consider who should train the first site. Will it be the SMEs themselves, or will they need to teach more people in order to accommodate how many end users there are? Once we've decided that, then we teach the end users. Keep an eye out for those star students because you may wish to invite them into the training team for your follow-on sites. One call out to pay attention to, just a word from the wise, is make sure you set aside some of those knowledgeable folks on your team so that they're available for post-go live support with the sites that already went live. Those sites are going to continue to have needs that could be met remotely or require some travel, and it's challenging to support those sites if everyone you have that's knowledgeable is supporting the site that's about to go live. As you progress through the staggered go lives, you'll end up with a widespread team of knowledge, and the beauty of this is that this widespread team can be leveraged remotely due to the cloud nature of D365. So your everyday salesperson or cashier or a warehouse supervisor who's really good at their job can train the next person without ever leaving their desk. Also consider who's going to create this detailed training plan, your metrics of success, the timing of the calendar and how it's all going to lay out, as well as the assessment methods that are going to be used. Do you have the internal resources who can plan this all out in detail and follow up with it throughout the entire project? This is something that we do every day for our clients. All right, next slide, Dave.
Hey, Natalie, before we go too far, there was a question in the chat that says, why do so many project teams ignore or underestimate the needed training and testing time?
That is a really good question. Part of it can be culture, I'd say. If your company's not used to testing and training in other areas of your business, it might not be instinctual for anybody to think that this is going to be a priority during your implementation. As you work with vendor partners like ourselves or software integrators, you'll probably find in their project plans that testing and training are baked into that process. So there will be encouragement from your vendor partners to make sure you prioritize it. But even then, it's ultimately up to the client to choose how important it is, what resources to invest. It takes a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of dedication. And I'd say the payoff is worth it because, as we mentioned before, you can have the system working exactly perfectly, but if your people don't know what they're doing, or they don't know how to recognize issues that may arise, they can't be partners with you during go live and post go live. So definitely make sure that you prioritize your testing and training. I know everything we've talked about, we say, oh, it's important, and it's true. Every part of this step is necessary, and that's why we touch on it. But your testing and training are definitely the most critical, and you have the most control over it as the client.
Thank you, Natalie. Just to piggyback on that, everyone has their day job. And so it's very difficult to time manage your day-to-day job, your day-to-day tasks, with additional training that needs to happen. And so you're trying to help your customers keep your warehouse running while also being told to test and to train and to be doing all of these tasks that lead up to go live. And it does come back down to that culture as well, like Natalie had said, of just from leadership, they need to hear how important each one of these steps are.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're at the point of go live readiness. This is your final checkpoint. It's where all the hard work has come together into these meetings. So how do you validate everything before going live is really up to you, but some great ways to management is by using tools like DevOps or Smart Sheets to track your task requirements, tests, training, and even your facility tasks, making sure your labels are up and that there's clear signs for dock doors and staging locations. Assign each one of these tasks to the key member that is going to perform them, and then stay on top of making sure that they're done. So don't just have a task, have who's responsible, the date that it needs to be done, and start checking in regularly about 3 to 4 months before go live. The closer you get to the big day, the more frequent these meetings need to happen. It may feel tedious, but with so many moving parts, we need to have constant check-ins to make sure everything's on track. As an example, one of the implementations we were a part of had well over 2,000 lines of tasks that needed to be completed. And it went all the way from, are your location labels up, to has UAT, SIT, all of those different testing scenarios happened, and they needed to be checked off before we were able to go live. Your go versus no-go meetings are crucial to ensuring a safe launch. Listen to your vendor partners' concerns. While everyone wants to push to live, it must be at the right time when the system is fully ready to support your business needs. If you've been following a detailed project plan, absolutely nothing in these meetings should come as a surprise. Dave? Go live is your last milestone, and there's a lot that can slip through the cracks if you're not careful. One key task is creating a clear escalation path. During go live, most errors will likely be user errors and not system. Make sure your trainers or your SMEs are that first line of defense to help the users with the correct steps, so IT and your developers can focus on actual configuration issues. After the user errors are identified, if there is a system error, have a clear process for the SMEs to escalate to the right teams, whether that's the credit team, accounts payable, sales, or any other department. Make sure this is well documented and communicated to all leaders so that they can cascade it down to their team members. Daily recap calls are another overlooked part of Go Live. These should include your project team and the leaders involved. Cover your key metrics like inbound and outbound KPIs, any risks or errors that might be found, but also take time to talk about the morale of both the customers and your front-end users. These conversations help pinpoint issues early drive improvements, and help prevent high turnover rates or business risks. As part of your post-go live support, you'd want to have that planned out carefully. Determine who needs to physically be on site and who can support remotely, and communicate this plan early to avoid any sort of scheduling conflicts. Don't just plan for week 1 of go live. Questions and concerns tend to arise more in week 3 or 4 as you have less support on site. So stagger your support to ensure the continued assistance of your team. Dave?
All of this information we've shared today ultimately leads to your end user experience, which includes your employees, but also your customers. They will both experience quite a lot of change. So both groups will also enjoy some of the benefits of D365, like a streamlined system that multiple users can see at once. The ERP information is typically available to at least view by even the warehouse folks. So an on-site warehouse manager could look up the customer's account or see their pricing, for example. And the security or permission settings would likely be set up to prevent them from editing anything. So instead of redirecting your customer's call to a different department, the very first person who picks up the phone can likely look up the answer for them right then. A major benefit is that the data is live, so employees can see the same information in real time. D365 also offers the ability to access the system from any place with an internet connection, because the login credentials are authenticated through Microsoft. So a manager, for example, could sign into their account from their phone and check on metrics for a meeting beforehand. Or in my own experience, you could help someone problem solve while walking through an airport. And of course, there are some potential challenges to consider. Make sure you choose your team internally and your partners very wisely to help you with these. Such a big change requires a solid change management plan. Your customers will need to be prepped on the changes they'll see in their documentation and other, potentially ordering processes or other processes that they'll be interacting with. And they'll also be interacting with your employees throughout the implementation. So your employees need to be coached on how to approach this change. And there are just many other change management factors to consider. Joe, could you share more about some of the benefits that Dexter's end users experienced?
So our training program was a tiered version, as was described on the slides, where we had our subject matter experts sat in on multiple meetings. We had requirements gathering, we had where we sat down and said, this is what we need. And then it was determined whether or not the system could do it. Once we determined what the system could or could not do, we started going through and making sure it was set up as we needed. And most of that was just, which toggle do we choose? Yes or no, things like that. As we went on through the process, we involved more and more people. We made sure that everyone understood what was going on. We had communication with, initially we were going live in a facility that had a DC, a branch, our support system for accounting and merchandising. It was basically a building, but it had everybody, every aspect was in that same location. And that worked well for us because we could collaborate well. In the next wave, we took those people out and we did the training for the next group, but it had to be remote at that time. And so then you have to worry about timing. Are they available? Because you don't know as well what their schedules are. You don't know what's coming up, whether their truck runs are going to be busy or whatever. And so then you have to consider how to schedule the remote training, how to make sure they get time to practice. And one thing we always tell our managers is that if you don't have time to learn it now, what are you going to do on day one when this is the only software you have now? And you've got to take care of that customer. You have got to get up in there, because if you wait, chaos is one word for it, okay? But you need that time for everyone to be comfortable. And if your employees are comfortable, if your change management has done its job and you've done your training, then when they are ready to be live in the system, your customers are ready to be live as well.
Thank you, Joe. Dave, let's go to the next slide. So lastly, we have a summary for you from today. We've gone into detail on each of the steps in an implementation to point out the unique things to consider for D365, and we have some takeaways to consider. First, implementing an ERP and WMS at the same time requires dedicated resources throughout the life cycle of a project. Jerilyn and I are just two people of many at Alpine who have experience with D365 as well as other systems. Second, design decisions and data accuracy are especially crucial for D365 and must be tested thoroughly. Consider all the round of testing that need to be planned, prepped, and executed for your business. Third, D365 can offer improved customer service and accuracy through real-time visibility and information shared between your ERP and WMS. Other benefits will depend on your design. And fourth, documentation and training approaches have to be strategic and comprehensive to capture the unique way D365 will be used in your business. These documents will be used throughout training, go live, and post go live, so they better be good. And last but not least, major change can be overwhelming to an organization, and we can help with that too. Will you need assistance developing a change management plan to manage all of those lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, of implementation? Just some things to consider. All right, next slide, please. So thank you for all your questions in the chat so far. I'm just going to take a look at the chat now and make sure we didn't miss any. All right, someone asks, now that Dexter is heading down the home stretch of its D365 implementation, are there any major lessons learned or anything that you might recommend to other companies approaching an ERP and WMS project?
So we did very kindly, I hope, rely on our third-party assistance as well. So don't think you have to do it by yourself, and also don't be so sure you can do it by yourself, because having an expert to kind of tap on your shoulder and say, hey, did you see that big pallet of stuff over in the corner of questions that we haven't answered yet? It's important to have help. Now, if your building, your company has enough people in it that you can do that, that is wonderful. But we had, I've lost track, I believe we've done what we refer to as 12 waves so far. We're not done yet. And we have leaned heavily on the people who do know what's going on. That's some of our internal resources, our external resources that give us the assistance that we need, because it takes a lot. You have to be prepared for a lot of questions, a lot of decisions, and it's going to take some time away from what you normally would. So don't be surprised when you've got to sit through some meetings to make some decisions, and then it makes it a little tougher on you to get your own stuff done. So having the support internally and externally is really the biggest thing that we have to worry with. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, when you have one building that is now live in the system, or 10, you still have to be providing them support, especially if you're ready to go and put some more buildings in. So think about the timing of all of the items that you have. And I have on my desk right now several calendars that says, okay, this is when this next group will be live and backing out. How many days of on-site training? How many days of remote training? What do we have to do to prep the managers before we get to there? What day to do it? All of these decisions. And I map it out on a calendar so that I hit those targets. And that preparation is really what's going to make a difference.
Thank you, Joe. I also want to add on that not only is it about how many people you have, but do they have the right knowledge? A lot of the questions that arise during implementation, whether it's during testing, training, go live itself, are multifaceted where it touches, it's not, it might be a question like, how do I do this task? Okay, that's very simply a training question. Okay, we're going to give that to the training people. But a lot of the questions are, okay, I did the task according to the documentation that was provided by the training team, but what do I do in this scenario when the system's behaving in this unique way? And there are a bunch of scenarios like that, but that's when you have to start pulling in people who understand the functionality of the system in a base level, the functionality that you decided on as a client with the software integrator. So if you had any customizations, they also need to understand, well, this is how it normally works, but this is how your system works exactly. And your business procedures to understand, well, the system can work in both of these ways, but the way that you guys have chosen to do it, client, is this way. So having a partner who is there from the beginning to the end of your implementation, in addition to your software integrator, is where we can fill in that bubble of those multifaceted questions. Jerilyn, was there anything you wanted to add? I'm just looking at the chat here to see if there's any others.
No, I feel like you and Joe have covered that question absolutely perfectly.
All right, thank you. And we're getting toward the end of our webinar time, and I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on to the next slide here, Dave. Last but not least, please join us again on October 16th this year to hear our coworker Deepan Kasturi present on revolutionizing logistics, the goods-to-person approach for efficient supply chains. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.